All right, thank you. So I must apologize first. I think the title on the agenda is a bit different than the one here. So that is the old title. I think the title was How Does AI and Web3 Come Together? But today I wanted to talk to you a bit about something more personal. So it's about building at the intersection and essentially the lessons and a lot of the mistakes that we've made when we were building the startup over the last couple of years. And hopefully you can learn something from that too. So just a bit about myself first. So I've been doing machine learning research for about the last 10 years. I did my postgrad degree at UCL in London. After that, I worked in a number of startups around London and then moved to Google DeepMind, where I stayed for about 5 years doing all kinds of research, primarily AI safety research actually, which is something that you hear a lot about in the news these days, about AGI and killer robots and whatnot. And then in 2021, I co-founded Kosen Labs, which is a company that sits sort of at the intersection of AI and Web3. And the idea was really to bring the kind of machine learning models and that kind of stuff into DeFi primarily, but then also to the kind of wider space. Now, when I accepted this talk actually back in February, I was still the CEO of the company, of Kosen Labs. I'm not anymore, actually. I've left a couple of months ago. The company is still actually ongoing, and my co-founder continued to do the work. We had some differences in visions in sort of where the company should move, so I decided to kind of pursue some other things. But yeah, I wanted to kind of use this presentation to tell you about a lot of the stuff that we did and some of the stuff that we could have done better, certainly. So the way the talk is going to be structured is basically going to cover 4 main things. Where I think we've learned the most. So first one is about fundraising. So I think the previous talk by Timur was a really good one, and we'll cover some of the similar points there. The second one is going to be hiring. So we spend a lot of time on hiring and finding good people and growing the team. Product obviously is not an important one, and the most fun is for the end. It is about legal and ops, which even though it sounds dry, it actually ends up being very, very important. So let's just jump right in. So in terms of fundraising, just to give you a setup on what we did and how it went for us, and it was actually a pretty crazy story. I mean, I didn't really know at the time because it was still my first startup, so I thought that was normal. But then later on, when I talked to other entrepreneurs and friends, they were like, wow, that's pretty crazy. So in June 2021, we started working on a ML prototype for essentially active liquidity management on Uniswap V3. Back then, it was sort of a very new thing. Uniswap came out in May 2021. So people didn't really know how to manage liquidity on these kind of concentrated liquidity exchanges, and they were losing a bunch of money. So what we wanted to do was create a machine learning model that kind of did this for you automatically, and you could just put in the money and it would kind of fix these ranges over time as needed. In July 2021, we actually managed to create a prototype model that was working and had some pretty decent results. The only problem was it was based on only like 2 or 3 months of data that existed at that point from Uniswap. And then in August 21, we started talking to a few friends. There were VCs just to see if we can actually raise money. We wanted to raise a few $100K. We were not very ambitious from that point of view. But then things just started snowballing, and we started to talking to a lot of VCs, and there was a lot of hype generated all of a sudden. And on 1st of September, I remember that day very well, we actually had a call with A16Z where they gave us a term sheet, and they gave us a $5 million investment, which to us back then was insane. So, there we are from kind of 0 to hero in 3 months, had a lot of money and thought we were on top of the world. So, what are we going to do? So in terms of learnings, I think what we did well, first thing, we were really lucky. I think it was the peak of the bull market, and that makes things a lot easier. It's perfect timing. The market was there. We had a narrative that was sort of crossing Web3 and AI. That was really good. Our background really helped, obviously. It was sort of a no-brainer. I think one thing that we did really well is that we kind of tried to move really fast. So in the month of August, when we actually started talking to VCs, we just said, okay, people seem to be interested. Let's just talk to as many VCs as we can in as little time as possible. And what that sort of brought was that, these VCs, they talk between each other all the time. And if, a couple of them like you, they'll tell their friends, then all of a sudden you have this hype spreading out. And what it turned out was that we didn't even contact A16Z. They contacted us through some channels. And they said, hey, we heard you're building this thing. We're super interested, which again came as a shock. But it allows to basically played this game really well and then forced them to give us a term sheet like really, really quickly because we had interest from different sides. And I think the idea itself was pretty good because it was anchored in sort of reality. And what I mean by that is that it's tangible enough for people to understand, for VCs to understand. It's like, okay, you're building this ML model on top of UniV3. Everybody understands that. But it still has a lot of prospects in the future. You know, people are expecting these AMMs to grow, for the market size to grow. So it has a potential to kind of develop into something interesting. Now, a couple of things that we didn't do well, and that would definitely change this time around, is that we signed a SAFE agreement. And you know, for those of you that don't know, SAFE is basically a convertible debt instrument. It's very popular in sort of pre-seed and seed stages. SAFE stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. You basically agree on some terms, such as in the future when you do a price round and you actually issue equity, we'll give you a maximum amount of money that your company is going to worth. Anything above that, we'll pay less. Right? So that's all good and dandy, but the SAFE agreement was actually invented in 2013. And the problem with that is that it hasn't gone through a proper bear market, a proper tech bear market. So people have never really seen what a SAFE agreement looks like when you have to do a big down round. And it's just not pretty. You know, you could think that with a SAFE agreement, you're selling sort of, 10% of your company, and then a bear market comes when the actual SAFE converts, the actual instrument converts into equity, and you're down like 35% of equity, which is definitely what you don't want to be. So the aim for us, I think, next time when we're doing this is to kind of do a price round straight away. We were actually offered the option of doing a price round with A6 and Z, but we didn't want to because it just takes a bit longer and there's like more lawyers involved, and we just wanted to get the money to quickly. But I think that's a cost that you have to kind of calculate in. And I think this is maybe a more controversial one, but I think we also raised too much money. So even though 5 million was sort of a standard raise back then, 3 to 5 million was sort of standard in the bull market. I think raising too much money can dilute your focus, and it can make you sort of try too many things at the same time and just make you too fat too quickly. And by that I mean you just overhire, or it's very easy to overhire because you're like, yeah, I just have money, I'll just hire all these people to do all these random things that you may not necessarily need straight away. So my kind of main takeaways is that obviously the right timing can be very helpful, and as the previous speaker said, you got to ride the wave. So if you're kind of wanting to build a company at the intersection of like AI and Web3, like now is the perfect time. The wave is definitely there. Another thing is that most VCs don't do their due diligence. I've seen that in our case. I've seen that in case of many other entrepreneurs or friends of mine. So they follow the herd mentality, as Timur also said. And you can use that to your advantage, right? If you can get 1 or 2 VCs that are interested and that can just hype up your idea, they can fill up your round very, very easily, and all the other ones will just come out of nowhere all of a sudden saying, oh yeah, we heard you have a great idea, but they haven't really even like looked at the presentation. So, do with that what you want. But so for term sheets, again, you got to consider carefully both the current market environment and the future market environment, and that goes back to the SAFE agreements that I said. Especially in crypto, if you're in a bull market now, the chances are that in 1 or 2 years, when your SAFE instrument converts, you're going to be in a bear market. That's kind of almost like a guaranteed in crypto. So you got to be careful, like what types of clauses you put in there, and think about, okay, what if the valuation gets cut in like half? What happens then? And again, raise the right amount of money. Don't raise too much. Don't raise too little. It's kind of hard to know from the beginning what that amount of money is, but maybe you can look at some other successful startups and see what they did. All right, so hiring. Hiring is a really big one. We spent a lot of time doing that. And first off, we said, okay, we're going to be a globally remote company. We thought it was cool. We thought it was like, yeah, we're not going to be in an office. It's going to be great. You can work from wherever you want. But that doesn't really work for a number of reasons, primarily because time zone differences. So we were based in Europe, and we had a couple of people in Asia. And basically, that was already hard enough. And then that didn't allow us to hire anyone in Americas, because crossing basically 3 time zone groups is impossible. And you as a founder are just going to be working 24/7, and that's not sustainable. So you got to really pick 1 or 2 groups, primarily, possibly if you can do one, Americas or Europe, especially for your core team. People should really be at least in the same time zone, if not in the same country. And that also makes things a lot easier if you want to do offsites and similar things like that. You got to pick up employment type. Now that's actually, we haven't thought about that initially, but then we were like, okay, why don't we just hire people as contractors? And that's kind of common in crypto, but it's not common in any other industry, especially if you want to hire people coming from big tech. They don't want to be contractors. They want to be full-time employees with all the benefits and pensions and all of that. So then you're like, okay, if I want to hire them in all these different countries, I need legal entities everywhere. And that's a lot of like legal headache and issues. So then you ask yourself, how do you kind of solve that question of legal entities everywhere? And there's one thing called EORs. So EORs are employers of record. They're basically companies that have companies in all countries around the world. And what they can do is they can hire people for you and then lease them to you. Even though they're like their employees, they're kind of your employees, right? And then you pay them for that service, and you pay them like a monthly fee and all of that. So it's really good. You can hire people really quickly. You can hire them in all countries around the world. But the problem is it's really hard to fire people once you hire them through that, through EORs, especially if you hire them as full-time employees, because you have options of both contractors and FTs. So we had a bunch of problems with actually letting people go once we needed to downsize the team for different reasons. Because there's many different labor laws in all these other countries. You got to know them all. So if you hire in Germany, you got to know German laws. If you hire people in France, you got to know French laws. The EORs are not really going to help you. They're going to protect their own interest, and they're going to tell you, oh, we can't fire them because this law and that law, and then you got to kind of negotiate with them basically and tell them, no, the law is actually this or that. For example, we had a case in Germany where we wanted to fire someone because of redundancy. We simply pivoted, and the job that they were doing was not necessary in any way anymore. And even the person agreed that, like, yeah, I need to be fired for redundancy, so there was no resistance from the employee itself. But this is a valid reason in Germany for firing people, but the EOR couldn't take that reason because they themselves cannot fire someone for redundancy. Because if they do, then they can't hire for the same role in the next 2 years. And given that they have like one company where they hire hundreds of people for all the other clients, for all the other companies, they can't use the reason of redundancy as a reason for firing. So that's a surprise for you, and then you got to kind of plan ahead and figure out what to do around that. So that's EORs. Then sourcing. How do you find good talent, right? So that's number one thing. Usually people kind of use their networks and all of that. But in general, you're not going to find enough people in your networks unless your network is like really huge. So you got to use all kinds of other means, message boards and finding people, hunting people on GitHub and whatever not, using contractors and sourcers who can do it for you. And it's a very, very long process. In some cases, for certain machine learning researcher positions, we had to interview over 100 people. And kind of managing that process itself is very tedious. So kind of setting up a process using some kind of HR software can really help. And managing expectations is another big one. So especially if you want to hire people from kind of traditional industries like big tech industries and so on, and which we did for machine learning researchers and engineers, they're not used to kind of being first fully remote. That's kind of weird for them because they're used to having an office. But you also kind of have to tell them, hey, we're working at a bit of a different pace, different time zones. It's going to be different hours, and there's not all these like great benefits that you get at Google and Facebook and so on, right? So it's more about, do you really want to do this kind of job and work in this kind of industry? And if not, then that's fine, right? So you just need to explain to them because they have very different expectations, so you got to be clear on that. This is a boring one, but an important one. Employment contracts. It sounds very boring, but it would actually save you a lot of hassle or create you a lot of hassle if you don't do it well. So just make sure you have a really, really solid employment contract that you give to people that really defines, sort of their responsibilities, the IP rights, all the stuff that kind of goes into it. Because if it ever comes to you having to let people go, that will be your document that you're going to use to basically say, hey, you haven't like performed well, or you breached this part of your contract or that. If you have a very lax employment contract, you're going to get sued, and then that's going to create a big, big problem for your company. And the VCs won't want to give you any more money until you resolve lawsuits and so on. So the kind of takeaways from here is you don't really want to be using EORs. So you want to open your own legal entity in 1 or 2 big markets where you can get the people you need. So it's probably America or EU, something like that. And If you want to use EORs for other countries, use them very sparingly and use them for contractors, because those people can be let go easily. The core team should be really in the same time zone. We had an issue where we were split between Asia and Europe, and it was a nightmare. We just had to bring people over to Europe in the end. Staying lean as long as possible is something I'm going to cover in a bit. But essentially, it's like don't overhire until you get a product market fit. Because if you overhire with a certain idea, and then you decide like, oh crap, I need to pivot, and you already hired like a bunch of people that are doing one certain thing that may not be necessary in your new idea, then you have to kind of let people go, and it's never a nice thing to do. And the final point is that if you're going to hire from your network, just be really careful about considering your own personal relationship with those people, right? Because if we tend to, I've made this mistake. I've hired some very close friends of mine, and it's just very difficult to separate like life and personal stuff. And it can come, and this can come in like many different forms, but it can just complicate the business relationship itself. So it's always best to kind of hire people who you know as acquaintances, but not really as super close friends, unless you're really sure that you can work with them in a good relationship. All right, the third thing, product. So the product itself, again, a backstory. What did we want to do? As I mentioned, we started off as a research company, really researching this kind of ML models for automated market making on Uniswap V3, concentrated liquidity, all of that. And we spent a lot of time doing that. But basically, after 8 months of research, it was clear to us that the problem was mathematically infeasible. It's a whole different sort of story why that is. And if this is a topic that interests you, I'm happy to talk about it later. But the gist of it is that the LP problem is essentially just broken, and the LPs are not compensated enough for the risk that they take. Certainly you can hear like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of people who made money LPing and all of that. Yes, they have, but in the long term, if you want to do this on many pairs in the long term, you're just going to get wrecked, right? So we concluded there's no simple solution or any kind of solution that we wanted to work on that satisfies the kind of LP exposure risk. So the product idea was dead, and we spent 8 months doing it. So what comes then? Well, then we have to pivot, right? So pivots are super hard, right? And the chances are you probably are going to have to do them if you're doing a company, right? Like it's kind of hard to say that the first idea will always be the idea that works, right? So you really don't want to make them even harder. And what I mean by that is that you should stay lean as long as possible, preferably until you hit some kind of product market fit. And again, cliche, but you should really try to build in prod, because that will shorten the time that you're building and then you're testing all of this, and it will tell you that your idea sucks maybe earlier. And the final thing is that you shouldn't pigeonhole yourself within a certain framework of thinking. And what I mean by that, in our case, it was when we were thinking, okay, what's the other idea that we want to try? What's this kind of new idea? We were saying, oh yeah, we're at the intersection of Web3 and AI, so the idea must fit within that framework. It cannot just be like, oh, let's just do this more AI stuff that's like not so related to Web3. Even though we had some good ideas about that, we just dismissed them. And in my opinion, kind of now in hindsight, I think that was a mistake. Now, if you do make all these mistakes that I just mentioned, as we did, then you're also in a place where you're pivoting remotely, and that's even harder. So what do you do then is, well, you try to get people together on an offsite and a hackathon for a couple of weeks. And that can speed things immensely, right? That can really get the kind of creative juices flowing, and it's nice to get all people together, and maybe it's one of the few times that they actually get to kind of interact in person and meet each other, right? So you hack out a few prototypes of different ideas, and then later on you can select one as the kind of most promising idea. And the final point here, over-communicate with your team. This applies kind of in general, especially if you're working remotely. But I think in cases where you're pivoting and the kind of mission of the company and the vision is changing, I think it's really important to kind of be very open and very clear with people, so that they don't lose focus and they don't lose kind of hope that this is going anywhere, right? Because it's sort of a trying time. And then the final thing, your ideas will be misunderstood, and a demo speaks more than 1,000 words. So we certainly had a number of cases where we had some ideas that we thought were good. And we kind of presented them mostly to some VCs, which kind of dismissed them very quickly. Even though, again, in hindsight now, I think they were good ideas. We just didn't make a demo to show it to them for them to understand it, because the line of questioning was always kind of going in the wrong direction, I think. So my main takeaways and some stuff that I will do differently next time here is, again, look for a problem and then find a solution rather than the other way around. We certainly fell into this problem, into this kind of mistake, where we were saying, okay, we have this like machine learning technology, whether that is GPT type of thing or any kind of machine learning optimization, and said, let's find a problem in DeFi or let's find a problem in Web3 to solve it with, right? Which is just the wrong approach. You should find a problem and then say, what is the kind of minimum thing needed to solve that problem rather than trying to fit a solution to it. Again, I said always question the framework with which you operate, so I've explained that one. Expecting pivots to happen, you should question these assumptions early, so you can question assumptions about the stuff that I'm doing now for the last like 6 months in the research, is that really something that's going to take me to where I want to be? I think founders in general, I found, definitely find themselves in these like weird states of mind where they're like truly believe that this is it, this is the stuff that I'm doing and this is going to work. And having a few people around you who are maybe a bit more grounded can always help you maybe course correct sometime earlier than before you fail fully. And always ask other builders for feedback. I think that's much better than asking VCs for feedback because VCs, in my opinion, are they have some of their own thesis, and if whatever you're building doesn't fit into their thesis, they'll not be like so creative in helping you get some feedback. And then finally, the most fun thing, legal and ops. I'm going to talk only about one thing here, and the one thing is basically the way of doing things, the way of structuring things as a crypto company. And the big dilemma I've seen when people start companies is, should I just go full crypto native? So meaning like start a DAO and try to be as much crypto native as possible, or should I just go kind of the standard Web2 way, open a company, just do the usual stuff, right? And I think my answer is somewhere in the middle, but let's first look at these two kind of extremes and see what we can get from that. So the first extreme is obviously full Web3, so you're going full DAO from the very beginning. You might have some kind of a holding company that can hold some kind of IP or something, but basically people are just hired and paid as contractors. They're paid in USDC, usually in stables, and this allows you a lot more flexibility to kind of move much faster and to skirt a lot of bureaucracy that can come with creating a regular company. It allows you to issue a token much more easily, and some would argue that in this day and age, having a token is kind of interesting and very, very important for competition. I mean, maybe I don't agree with that fully, but certainly we've seen some of our competitors do that and just become a lot more popular and build a community much faster just because they have a token, no matter what the product is, really. But then again, you're going to have a lot of real-world interfacing problems. So it's going to be hard for you to open, for example, a Google Cloud account, right? Because you don't have a company and you're not really going to get support from them, and whose credit card are you going to use, and it's just going to be a lot of hustle there. Restricted hiring pool, again, people who come from big tech and other industries, they want a normal working environment. They don't want to be part of a DAO. Like, what is a DAO to them? That is weird. And then the final thing is you're open to all kinds of regulatory and legal actions. So I think there's been a lot of discussion about that in the last year, but DAOs can be quite legally liable for all kinds of things because they don't really have the protection of the LLC or whatever other company structure you choose to use. Now, the other end of it is obviously kind of the standard going full Web2. You have a company, you kind of follow all the rules, although when you're dealing with crypto, you're navigating the gray zone a lot. There's going to be a lot of places where you're like, I don't really know what the rules are. You're going to be spending a lot of money on lawyers who are going to tell you a lot of cryptic stuff that you don't understand as well. So yeah, that's the problem. But it's obviously much harder to issue a token as well. It can be done, of course, and many companies have done that. But it requires a lot of corporate structuring and some kind of layering and basically a lot of dollars to do that. But it's a lot easier to hire. It's a lot easier to interface with the real world, work with other companies, protect your IP, and protect yourself basically as a director of the company with the general liability and all of that stuff. So my kind of takeaway from that is really, this is what I've seen a lot of other kind of successful Web3 companies do, is that they make a bit of a hybrid here. They start with a company and then they try moving towards the DAO, towards the foundation. The foundation then later allows them to issue a token. So all of that it's pretty complicated. I mean, if something like this actually interests you, I'm happy to talk to you about, because we've spent a lot of money and time on lawyers talking to them about this, of how you would kind of structure these types of things. But again, having a token is a double-edged sword, and when you want to issue a token, the lawyer that you speak to, if he's a good crypto lawyer, he'll offer you like a whole range of possibilities, right? You can go with like a really risky gung-ho option, or you can go with like a really tight legal option, and the difference between that is usually in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So yeah, depends. And finally, yeah, there's principles here that are kind of the one size doesn't fit all. So if you are a project that can actually decentralize quickly, and it makes sense for you to be a DAO from the very beginning, then that's probably the best option, right? But that's just not the case for like, I think 95 plus projects out there. So they need to kind of pick this hybrid approach. And I think a lot of cases just don't think that because you're kind of starting a Web3 company or even a DAO, none of the kind of classic business practices apply to you. So you still need to do all kinds of accounting and all of that stuff that goes with it. Because if you have any kind of VC investors, they will ask you for your quarterly statements. They will ask you for like all kinds of balance sheets, assets, and all of that. So you got to do that. And yeah, final point is hire a good crypto lawyer. I mean, there are far and few in between, but some of them can really help you. But again, don't always listen to them, because they are lawyers in the end. No disrespect to any lawyers here, if there are any, but they always have their own sort of point of view, and they'll just say like, yeah, this is kind of gray zone, this is legal, this is maybe not legal, and you're just gonna kind of pick up yourself and decide what is the amount of risk that you want to take. And that's all. I think this is just the quote that I wanted to leave you with. So always take everyone's other entrepreneurs' lessons with a grain of salt, because everyone's path is different, and the problems that you face are going to be probably very different. All right. Any questions? This is also for myself.
Thank you for this speech. Very interesting, very useful, even though it's not about Web3 or AI, but about how to run your own company. But it's amazing, and I'm like happy that you had this journey and experience. And the question is about that right amount of money that you need to raise. And even though you say that it's really hard to understand like what is the right amount, but maybe you can share about some criteria. Maybe there should be money to spend for your core team for 20 people for 1, 2, 3 years, and it will be enough, or any other ideas or criteria. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's super good question. There's no single, I think, set of criteria here, but something that I think about, or that I would think about next time is, what is the minimum number of people that you need to build the product that you're building? That's definitely not 20 or even 15 or 10. Like, I think you can build with 5. Like 5 good engineers is what you need, but you need to find those like really, really good engineers, those 10x engineers, and they're going to cost you, right? So you got to figure out, okay, how much are they going to cost me? You want to kind of have runway for 2.5 years. 2 years is the kind of usual recommended, but now if you're in a bear market in crypto, you might want to extend that to 3. So calculating that, getting the salaries, getting the number of people that you need, thinking about where you're going to need a lot of compute. So if you're building a machine learning startup, you're going to be spending a lot of money on that. And then you can get to a number that is sort of realistic, I would guess. I mean, and then of course add on top of that any kind of unpredictable things that happen amount, and obviously the legal amount, because in crypto that's going to cost you a lot, especially if you're wanting to do this corporate structuring around token. You have to do things that will run into 6 figures. So in that sense, I would say 3 million is probably enough to kind of kickstart a company, because pivoting is really hard, and that is one part where I think it's better to just run out of money and try again, rather than kind of try to pull the whole company in a totally different direction and kind of restructure everything, and it just brings a lot of difficulties. And if you just get enough money to build the thing you're planning to build, with obviously some leeway to get some kind of small pivots done, that should be enough, right? And then you just run out of money or you succeed. It doesn't matter. You can try again, right? Rather than saying, oh no, now we have like still 1.5 million left or 2 million left. We can try something new. But you already spent your 3 million, and you basically owe those 3 million to your investors, right? So now even if you make success with the other 2 million, you've kind of gambled away those 60% of your investment on something that is not useful. So that can kind of come and haunt you down the line. I don't know if I'm making any sense there, but you essentially want to use the money that you get as much as possible for the thing you eventually end up building and for the thing that makes you money, rather than on kind of all the other side explorations that will not really net you money. So if you don't have a lot of it, then you just really focus on the thing that is important.
Hi, thank you for the nice presentation. I have a question. I assume that you will begin a new company and something like that. And what are the core values that you will look into your next partner for that business, or what are the questions you will ask your partner before going into partnership?
I love that question. That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem this time is, I love my partner. He was really, really good. But the problem is, like, me and him were very similar. And that's kind of probably the biggest issue, right? We were both engineers. We were both worked at DeepMind. We were both really good at AI. I certainly had more affinity towards the kind of business side of things and all of that, but it was not enough. Like, I felt if I had someone who was actually really good at like marketing and community and kind of business development, would have helped me a lot more, because I could have handled the technical part, right? Again, if you have a technical co-founder, then you can really think about, you can kind of bounce around a lot of ideas on technical side and that can be helpful. But I would say, yeah, just look for complementary skills, and I can certainly be sometimes a bit less grounded in a sense, and just a bit hesitant to kind of make a decision. So whoever can kind of complement that, and whoever is like more quick on the trigger, let's say, I think that's a good combo. Because if you have two people who are like that, then nothing gets done in the end,
And like, what are the red flags you would like immediately, let's say, pass on the opportunity? Let's say.
You mean on the co-founder?
On the co-founder.
I think there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of things that you just see. But I think it's basically people who really crack under pressure really quickly and have no patience, right? So that's one. And actually, maybe even more important one is someone who cannot have a discussion and a debate, right? Because that's really going to be like 50% of your time when you're discussing with your co-founder. You're not going to agree on something. And someone who can take the feedback and say, okay, fine. I can see your point, but maybe I don't agree with this. But let's agree on a direction, right? That's super important. If you can't get to that, then the company's not going to go anywhere, right? And maybe another advice I think is don't do 50-50 equity split. I think that was sort of a mistake that we made, because then there's no leader. Like you have no one to just cut and say this is how we're going to do it. So I would say at least 60-40 or whatever kind of makes sense. But someone has to basically take the reins and say, I'm running this company, and my word is the last one. Not saying that you should be a dictator, right? But but kind of also, yes, sometimes.
I really have to say again, you are really introspective, and it's really amazing. Don't make, I'm guessing, really hard on yourself, and you really overthink and go into. I just wanted to say again that it's really amazing that you're so highly introspective, and I'm guessing it comes from overthinking, because I recognize it. But I mean, the amount of lessons that you extracted from these experiences, trust me, it takes a bunch of entrepreneurs a lifetime, and they still don't get it. So it's great that you put on, you know what you're good at, you know what you're missing, and you're gonna get better and better a lot faster. Thank you very much for sharing all of this with us.
It's a curse and a gift.
As everything is.
Thank you. Great presentation. I have a question. Like, you selected to build a company based on the AI, which you were very proficient, like an expert, and Web3. So what do you think about Web3? Say, if you started with AI, say manufacturing, will it has bigger chance to succeed or not? Like, the selection of Web3, was it the right step, or it just confused you somehow?
Very good question. I mean, I gotta preface it with the fact that I came to Web3 from my ideological side. I've been in crypto since like 2015, and it was more from the kind of anarchist side that I came into it, and it's been part of my life ever since I've kind of even worked in AI and DeepMind. So my wish was really to bring these two things together. Maybe that's not the best sort of way of coming into a business from the ideological side, but I wanted to give it a try. And I think I would say, especially a couple of years ago when we did that, there was just not many good use cases for AI in crypto, and we've definitely found that out during the kind of lifetime of the company. Nowadays, with GPT 3 and 4, you're definitely seeing people saying, okay, we can use it to kind of help people build smart contracts, code, do some search. That's all good. Those are actually like good use cases. ZKML can also be good, although I think it's still early days on that. But before anything that you wanted to do with ML and crypto had to be centralized. I think still is, right? Because how are you gonna, you're gonna build some fancy model on some data, and then you can plug it into some kind of a crypto service. It's just not gonna be decentralized, right? The only way you can make this work is in cases of like MEV, block building, trading, any of those kind of centralized type of things that you want to do with AI. I think to get to the point where Web3 and AI are actually meaningfully working together in a decentralized way, I think it's going to take us some years still. I don't know if that answers the question.
Hi, here in the back. Hello, hi. Great presentation, great talk. In one of your last slides, you had this sentence that really resonated with me. It said something along the lines that even though you're working in Web3, don't think that the rules of, previous businesses don't apply here. I would like to play the devil's advocate and ask you for your opinion on if you think that the Web3 industry as such is not as successful because we are not applying enough lessons from the hundreds of years of entrepreneurship that, came before that. We are, mystifying and pulling, like all of these things around Web3 into like, oh, this is something quite esoteric, but at the end of the day, it's very simple. Money must come in, money must go out, costs have to be, paid and so on. Like, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's the devil's advocate, really. That's pretty much what I agree with. Yeah, there's no, I mean, the unit economics and just the general economics applies to this space as well, right? Like, I think people got this idea that we can just print money out of nowhere because we print tokens and all of a sudden they have value. And, where does this value come from? It comes from people who just want to speculate, right? So I think speculators have really driven the economics of crypto. But if you take that away, as you do in a bear market, you just see that nowadays VCs are asking you for like, oh, do you have traction? Do you have users? Do you have revenue? In the bull market, nobody asked you that. They were like, oh yeah, you're gonna issue a token? Great, here's money, right? And it's just a bit of a broken model, right? Like there's no, I'm not saying, of course, there's companies who are doing that, but the problem is there's just not enough users in Web3. And if you don't have users, you're not gonna really be making revenue. I mean, the few protocols that are actually making revenue, like, I don't know, Uniswap and Curve and so on, like these DEXs, they're catering to the main user group in crypto, which is gamblers, right, and speculators. I think everything else that we've seen has been sort of ethereal, things like gaming and Axie and all of that. Again, it's been people who are not really users and they're using the game because they like the game. They use the game because they can earn money. So it's sort of a subset of that. I think for crypto to go mainstream and to actually get users and to actually obey the economics and not just the boom and bust cycles that come with VC money going in and out, it will require some kind of actual useful use cases. And that's just about it.